So have you ever wondered what exactly is in the Bible? Maybe you're new to Christianity, or maybe you're not a Christian at all, but you've heard some things about the Bible and you're curious to know for yourself what's going on inside of here. And it seems, because it's a book, that you start at the beginning and read to the end and you'd have all the answers, but that's a really, really hard way to read this book. For most people, that's not even the right way. So in this video, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for how to read the Bible, where you should start, what Bible you should use, and a lot of it's going to be based on exactly what you want to do with the Bible and what you're looking to get out of it. Hi friends, my name is Greg Simpson. I'm a minister in the United Church of Canada. So it's kind of my job to know what goes on inside this book. And I'll admit to you, there's only a couple of times in my life that I've actually read this from front to back. And even when I say that, it's not like I started here and finished there. I was using a reading plan that helped me get through the entire Bible over the course of a year. And you read little bits and pieces from different places. That's one way that I've read the Bible, and in that time, my goal was to read the whole thing. And I've done that a couple of times now. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of reading, and you need to dedicate quite a bit of time to do that. But for me, it was very much worth it. What about you? Exactly why are you jumping into the Bible? Maybe you've been around church for some time and you realize that over the course of your life in church, you've never actually read all of it. You've seen little bits and pieces, you've had parts of it interpreted, but there are parts that you still don't know anything about. And maybe if I said, could you flip to the book of Zechariah, you'd be like, I don't even know where to find that. That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you are looking to learn a little more. Or maybe you don't know anything about it. It's the first time picking it up. You're being pulled for some reason to pick up a Bible and read it, and you don't even know where to start. And it seems, because it's a book, that you would start at the beginning. But if you go looking, I've got another video on my channel that outlines what exactly is in the Bible. And in that video, I talk about the fact that for the Protestant Bible anyhow, there are 66 different books in here, and they're written by different people, and they're written in different time frames, and they're written in different contexts, and they're written with different audiences and intentions in mind. So it doesn't read like a novel from front to back where there's one constant storyline that continues through. And so because of that, I strongly encourage you to do a little bit of cherry picking. Start at a spot that has meaning to you, has value to you. There are many people who do start at the beginning. It feels natural to start at the book of Genesis. First part of it was written as a poem in the original Hebrew. We don't get much of that poeticness in the English translations, but it's this sweeping tale. And so Genesis actually is not too hard to just pick up and read, but as you get into Exodus and Leviticus, it gets a little bit harder. But there are lots of other places that you can start in the Bible, and it can give you a sense of what maybe the bigger story is, or what some of the things that you're interested in finding, what they might mean. So perhaps, let's use for example that you are a Christian and you want to know more about Jesus. A really great place to start would be any of the four Gospels, and they're the ones that start the New Testament. If you want to find them, you're going to flip to about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through the Bible. They start right there. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. All of them tell the story of Jesus from slightly different lenses. If you just want to get it through it quickly, read Mark. It's the shortest of them. It's sometimes a little bit terse. It's not very flowery. There aren't a lot of extra details, but it's very valuable in getting through the story of Mark. And actually, I've read through the book of Mark on my channel. And so if you want to just sit and listen, you can do that. And I think it only takes about an hour and 3/4. I think it's just short of 2 hours long to read through the whole book, but I've got it broken up in chapters so you can jump in wherever you want. I'm going to be reading lots of other books of the Bible that way too, so if you want to listen rather than read for yourself, you can go find those videos on my channel as well. If you're interested to get a little bit deeper into the emotion of the story of Jesus, I would recommend the book of John. It's not always chronological as it walks through Jesus' life, the way that the first three Gospels are, but It works more thematically, and as you read it, you can feel these themes about Jesus' life and these themes about what John wants us to learn about Jesus as we read it through. And it is truly beautiful literature. I mean, there are a lot of really beautiful parts of this book. There are good reasons that 2,000 and 3,000 years later, these stories are still available to us. They're still read and shared and recounted by millions, in fact, billions of people around the world, because they're beautiful literature. They're beautiful stories. They have incredibly intense human meaning. They have a lot to say. Now, perhaps you've got a particular book that you want to read through. I would suggest, here's another tip, and it's one that I wish maybe I knew a little bit earlier. There are an awful lot of resources online where you can find summaries of books of the Bible. I'm not sure if you've encountered the Bible Project. I'll put a link in the description below. They're an amazing group who put together really beautiful videos that do a summary of each of the books of the Bible, sort of like a Cole's Notes or a Cliff Notes, but they've got beautiful graphics that go along with it. They walk through not just the literal story broken down, but there's some of the intent of why the story was shared that way. And so if you're starting to read a particular book of the Bible, that can help immensely to let you know what the scope of that particular book is going to be. And then as you're reading, you'll be noting where those pieces all fit in the bigger part of the story. If you are a bigger fan of reading than watching, then I would strongly recommend that you pick up a student Bible or a learning Bible. I've got a collection of them. This particular one is a Zondervan New International Version study Bible. And I don't know if you'll be able to see very well, but on each page, this much is the content of the actual Bible, but then this is all references and additional information, and sometimes, like in this case, there's more reference than there is Bible. It makes for a very thick book. There's a lot of reading in here. There's a lot to do, but as you're reading something, if you hit something that you don't quite understand, there's a good chance that there's context, there's more information to be found here. Now, there are a lot of different types of study Bibles. They will lead you in particular directions. Different publishers have different theological lenses that they would share their study work through. And so it's worth finding one that connects with you. Now, of course, you're not going to go buy several $80 or $90 Bibles just to find the one you like, but talk to some friends, talk to perhaps a minister or a biblical scholar or somebody you know who has spent some time in this. If you want to ask me, I would be very, very happy to have some conversation in the comments below about what particular flavor of a study Bible might work for you. Each study Bible has particular context and different theological leanings and different lenses, and that can really make a difference on how you read the Bible. That being said, even the version of the Bible that you choose can make a big difference. If you really, really like the flowery wording of Shakespeare, then I would strongly recommend you look at the King James Bible. It's the one that has lots of these and thous, and if you're reading a book like the Psalms, it is truly beautiful poetry. It's absolutely amazing, and very often, if I'm about to read a psalm, I'll go back to the King James. It's wonderful. A lot of the rest of the time, I personally find the King James a little heavy, a little bit of slogging through because it's using language that's 400 years old. It was translated in the late 1500s, early 1600s. And so that's a time frame where their language, the way they spoke and the way they wrote, is quite different than how we do now. And so there's a lot of interpretation just to get what the meaning of the words are, let alone the meaning and the story behind the words. So that can be a really hard go if you're brand new to this. And then sort of on the very other end of the spectrum as far as readability is there are Bibles like this. So this is an example. This is called The Message. I do recommend this to some people, but this is not a translation. This is called a paraphrase. So there's more intention here to do interpretation of the original wording of the Bible to bring it into a language that feels more comfortable so that the language itself doesn't act as a hurdle. That being said, all of that interpretation has its own lens to it. And what I find is The Message feels very North American. The language and the word choices and even the turns of phrase. I'm Canadian and sometimes it even feels a little bit American to me, which makes sense. It was written by an American and he was writing for a very specific context. That being said, if you're starting with the Bible, this can be one of the most accessible ways to jump into it. Now, you don't even have to spend money on these. There are many online resources where all of these Bible translations and paraphrases are available for free. One example that I use all the time is BibleGateway.com. It's really great. You can even do parallel versions, so you can have a verse up here with the Message and another verse up with the New Revised Standard Version and do some comparison back and forth. I do that very often when I'm preparing for a sermon or for working on Bible study. I have in front of me a stack of 6 different Bibles of 6 different translations. Another one that's sort of middle of the road but definitely easy to read is the Good News Bible. I very strongly recommend this for many people. It stays truer to the original words than the Message does, but it definitely has a higher level of readability. You can kind of flow with it a little bit better. So those are a few tips, a few ideas. Another little suggestion: in a study Bible, very often, and not just study Bible, some others do too, very often at the beginning of a book of the Bible, they'll have a little synopsis of what goes on in that book. In this particular one, it even talks, especially for the New Testament, it talks about who wrote it, approximately when it was written, who they were writing to, and what their general intention was. And when you're looking at the 4 different Gospels and realizing that they were written to different audiences for different purposes by different people, it really helps you understand why when you read a particular story in Matthew, it sounds very different than when you read that same story in John. And if you can have that in the back of your head while you're reading, it makes it much more accessible. It makes it easier to get the context of what you're reading. My last tip that I'm going to give you, and I think is probably the biggest and most important one, is work with people you know. Work on this together. Even if you're not going to sit down and read together, because reading is a very private individual thing, but talk about it with people you know. You might know a minister, you might know somebody who's interested in the Bible, you might work with somebody who has some experience in reading the Bible. One of the most valuable parts of biblical work at all is the relationships and the building of learning as you go to other people. One of my favorite things to do is Bible study. When we sit down with a group of people, open scripture and say, what does this say to me today? And if you do stick with it and you've read all the way through the Bible, or maybe you've listened to an audiobook all the way through the Bible, go back and do it again. Open up scripture and read that piece again, because I guarantee you that because you've changed since the last time you read that scripture, you will hear or feel something different when you read it. I spend my life opening the pages of this book and reading and finding, and each time I go into scripture, I find something a little bit different. When I'm preparing a sermon for a Sunday morning, very often from a couple of weeks before when I had first done some work till the day before, I've changed enough over 2 or 3 weeks to realize that I need to modify some of what I'm going to say. Or maybe the context of the world has changed enough to make it feel a little bit different. This is one of the reasons that this is referred to as the Living Bible. It is something that moves and breathes and works with us. And when we read it, it is impacting our lives in truly special ways. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stick around if you want to just listen along as I read the Bible, or if you want more tips and tricks and information about what's to be found in here. I love the Bible and I love digging into it, and I love the conversations that we can have as we dig into the Bible together. So I invite you to comment, share. If there's a version of the Bible, a translation, a paraphrase that you really, really like, I would love it if you tell me which one that is and why you like it. I bounce back and forth between about 4 different favorites depending on the day of the week, and I use them in different ways for different purposes as well. So I would love to hear what your favorites are. If you want to be notified when I upload the next video, click subscribe and the little bell beside it, but you already knew all that. If you click like, then I know that you like it, and that's pretty awesome. And YouTube knows too, and they're more likely to give you more content just like this. Thanks so much, friends. I love you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.